no I money. Ebe I'm watching that. Of you know the more. Everywhere you put at the banana. I'm watching a Nyan. Any years you sooner than mobile too. I'm watching a Musunka. I can't just with that. If I will see a best year, I will see a best year. Open doors will come. A bench and I was smoking once and I will back. I'm a person in this one. I bet you come on. If Musunga, if Musunga, I can't judge them so that I will be quite up. Open to do. Sebese, I did the Abba. Jordan catch you any day. Get the upon your minute, the Abba, and Tifasan of a got to. Bringing Toto, the Abesha Wapu. I can count the damn when you are born. The Minty, open doors will come.
Greetings, Aquaba. Welcome. Hello. Happy Sunday. We hope that you are well today. Hope you are reaching your highest level mental, physical, and spiritual existence on this Sunday afternoon. And we're thankful that you have decided to join us for this week's presentation by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Our Ancestors' Voices. Our topic today, of course, is the utter failure of African faith institutions, the utter failure of African faith institutions. And we realize when we say that, based on how most of us are conditioned out here, the immediate response is that we're saying a religion or spiritual faith has no value. So let's just say up front, that is not the message we have today. The message we have today is the way that we practice our spiritual faith. If that practice is divorced from principles and actions based upon justice, then that practice is not only a complete waste of time, but it's utter service to the people that enslave humanity. So that's the basis of our discussion today. And we're so happy that you've decided to join us. For this, we give honor and thanks to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. This is their rightful land. For 500 plus years, they are fighting to regain their self-determination, and reacquire these lands back. They are a people just like us as African people who are unquestionably connected to the land. And so by stealing the land from the indigenous people, that is an utter blow to their ability to determine their own destiny, just like it's a blow to us to determine our destiny, being separated and distanced from our homeland. And this is not our homeland, you all. This is the slave plantation. Our homeland is Africa. And the fact that we know so little about it and we want so little to do with it is not by mistake. So we give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Their victory is our victory. Our victory is their victory. And on the same token, we honor and respect our African ancestors. They fought so hard to retain our dignity. And so many of us just give that dignity away. And that's hopefully, if you gain anything from these programs, is that we have to, as Ahmed Sekou Touré told us, we as African people always have to prioritize upholding our dignity as a people. That's the most important thing that we can do. So we're glad that you're able to join us here. We have the QR code on the screen there, representing one of our projects in the APRP, the Thomas Sankara, I can't talk today, capitalism, the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity in Burkina Faso. This is one of the many projects on the ground throughout Africa that are connected to the Pan-African work and objective that we are fighting for. So we ask you to take your smartphone. We really got to work to make sure the phone isn't smarter than we are, don't we? But take that phone and read the QR code on the screen and make yourself a monthly donor to the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. We'll have the URL on all of the pages of the presentation today, and we'll have the QR code at the end of the presentation again. But this is how we gain freedom and liberty for our people, is ensuring that our education is based on our culture as African people and our connection to one another based on our ability to understand that doing this is how we gain our freedom and our forward progress. So we start, as we always do, just by introductions. Here are some ways that you can donate to the All African People's Revolutionary Party to help with our work. That is always a good idea. But our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the APRP. And the APRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party that is based in Africa, not New York, not LA, not San Francisco, based in Africa, the national home of all people of African descent, scattered and suffering in over 120 countries in the world, 2 billion of us. Our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one unified socialist Africa. One unified socialist Africa. We know that Pan-Africanism realized is the solution to the problems we face in all those places I just mentioned. So that's what we're fighting for. And our ability to achieve it, our blueprint to achieve it, is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, an outstanding book that explains the strategy that we are embarking upon to bring about Pan-Africanism on the ground throughout the African continent and the African world. And the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity is one of many projects like that that we have. And we're asking you to support independent, revolutionary Pan-African work. Because if we don't do it, I don't know who we think is going to do it. And our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by APRP organizers, myself, Ajamu, and Shakura, my biological and ideological daughter. And we are, again, thankful that you're here. And so to get us started with our topic, the utter failure of African faith institutions, I will hand it over to Shakura.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, kind sir. I appreciate that. All right, good people. Hello, hello. So I'm so excited to talk about today's particular conversation because I think that a lot of times, especially for Africans, I understand how important and special religion is to us. And I've really come to learn that for some of us, there's a difference in how we define religion compared to spirituality. So we wanted to start off these particular slides by giving you all the All African People's Revolutionary Party definition on how we would define religion versus spirituality. And of course, keep in mind, we're not citing this from Webster or some colonizer of some type or European descent person. We're citing this based off of humanity and people loving justice, seeking approval in terms of how we can eradicate oppression. And so these definitions, are based off of peace-loving people who are seeking a quality of life for all people, regardless of how much income they make. And so when we think about religion, we can think about it from an organizational definition as being defined as, quote, a set of practices and rituals that are carried out consistently. Now, we can also kind of compare that to spirituality, which would be defined as a system of beliefs and principles that guide your actions. So we have religion, which is a set of principles, a set of practices and rituals that are carried out consistently, practices and rituals carried out consistently. And spirituality, a system of beliefs and principles that guide your actions. So we have one situation where it's principles and rituals that are carried out, but there's not really a connection about how your decisions are being made. But with spirituality, it is a system of beliefs and principles that guide, they influence the kind of decisions that you make because it guides your actions, right? And so similarly to our struggle for justice, we can think about how true faith within our organization's definition and lens, it has to be viewed as consistent with revolutionary ideas and practices. We are here today to explain to you that true faith, real faith, is not going to be separate from any idea of justice. It is not going to be, well, you have religion and then you have justice. Like, we don't believe that those are separate. We believe that real faith that is based on people loving, justice seeking people, it's only going to be based on justice. It's only going to be based on humanity. It's going to be based on people deserving a quality of life. Again, regardless of what their class status is, regardless of how much income they have. And in this case, regardless of the religion or spirituality that they use in their life, depending on their lifestyles, right? So if we're thinking about that, then we can think about how we believe in any pure or integral or genuine faith. It has to support revolutionary change. It has to. Because if we kind of break down again, like, what is the purpose of religion versus what is the purpose of spirituality? In both cases, you have a situation where there is something that a person is seeking in terms of using in their life. So if it's their religion, then they have a set of practices and rituals. If it's spirituality, it's a system of beliefs and principles. And so in either way, it's something people are choosing to insert in their life and use, which means that religion or that spirituality, or maybe that both of those, they must be rooted in revolutionary change. Because more often than not, as we know, if we think about the history and the herstory and the theirstory, then we know that since the beginning of time, not just Africans, there's several groups that have expressed their connection with spirituality or their connection with religion or their connection with both. And in so many cases, we've seen that a lot of times it was that connection with spirituality, that connection with religion, that connection with both that allowed us to get through some really difficult times. But what was happening for us to even resort to that? It was something so dehumanizing that we had no choice but to turn and try to have our faith be the one thing that we would hope would change the reality of which we were currently facing. And so again, if we were able to use spirituality and religion so far ago for those things, then we should be able to still connect it to a revolutionary change today. That should not have changed at all over the course of history. And again, like, we would argue as people of the All African People's Revolutionary Party that we should still be using religion. We should still be using spirituality for revolutionary changes today. We don't believe that we live in a post-racial world. We don't believe that we live in a post-sexist or post-patriarchal world. We don't believe that oppression is gone. We don't believe that oppression is eradicated. We do not believe that. And so because oppression is still very much alive and well, very much alive and well, that means we need to use every single tool in our toolkit to our advantage, which includes religion and spirituality. Why would those be any different? And case in point, we should be using them to eradicate colonization. We should be using them to eradicate any leftover residue of the fact that we still don't have control of our land. We should be using spirituality and religion to get our lands back. We should be using it to help support other people get their lands back. We should be using it in every aspect that we can. We should be using spirituality and religion to end poverty and unhousedness and homelessness and shelterlessness. We should be using it to eradicate people who are starving and on the streets. We should be using it to eradicate the fact that children are being abused. We should use it to eradicate the fact that people don't have proper health conditions taken care of, and they are more sicker than we know, and they don't even have the resources to get the treatment that they need. We should be using these things in every aspect. And I'm not necessarily talking about, going to a building on a certain day of the week. I'm saying thinking more critically about how your spirituality and how your religion can play a part in terminating these situations that people are facing. Because if you truly are what we would consider a spiritual person, or if you truly are what we would consider a religious person, again, based off of the definitions that I read off. So if you're religious, then you consider using a set of practices and rituals that you carry out constantly. And if you're spiritual, then you're using a system of beliefs or principles that guide your actions. Either way, or maybe you're using both, either way or both, you should be in a position where you can start to think more critically about how those two choices that you're making as a spiritual person or as a religious person, how they should start to manifest past the building that you go to once a week, where you fellowship and worship with other people. They should start to manifest past that. And we really shouldn't be using them for personal gain. We shouldn't be using them to have materials and to have more income. We should be using them, again, to terminate oppression. That's what we should be using them for, because that's what they were used for so long ago, so that our ancestors could survive to be able to fight and to have us be in the space that we're in now. We have said before, and we will say again, my dad just pointed it out, but we have all these ancestors who fought and gave up their lives for us so that we could all be in a space today at this time of day, whatever time you're listening to this particular broadcast or any of the other broadcasts and platforms that the AAPRP is using, but you are using some type of device that has a connection to the internet so that you can tune into this. There are several people who died so that we could be doing that today. I don't know what weather you all are having, but I'm sitting in a room that is clearly cooled off with air conditioning because I am privileged to know that my ancestors died so that I could sit comfortably today talking about how they died so that we could remember their names. There is a reason that this seminar is called Our Ancestors' Voices, because we must never forget what they have done for us. And in thinking about what they have done for us, we need to do something for the future generations to come. It is not up for decision. It is finalized. This is a part of our destiny. We do not have a choice, because our ancestors didn't have a choice, and they knew that. That's why they gave up their lives for us. We can see all these pictures on the left. We have Fannie Lou Hamer here, we have Malcolm X, and then we have Kwame Nkrumah. And so just thinking about all the work that these folks did in different parts of the world, in different times of the world, the work that these folks did. How many death threats did they get? How many opportunities did they have where somebody tried to take their lives? How many opportunities did they have where people they thought they could trust tried to take their lives? But they still all found a way to use their spirituality. They still all found a way to use their religion to advance the struggles for African people everywhere, not just in their neighborhood where they lived, not just in their household, but they found a way to change the course of history and herstory and their history for every single one of us. The whole reason that all of us are here today is because these three people understood that they had a massive responsibility to change the conditions in the world. And we need to understand that too. It is really up to us to continue to understand how we can still make a difference. Next slide, please. So if you are thinking, well, is she talking about Christianity? Well, yes, I am. But I'm also talking about people who practice Islam. I'm talking about people who practice Judaism. I'm talking about people who practice Santeria or whatever faith subscribe to you, and how you find a way to meet your spiritual needs or your religious needs or both. The essence is what we're getting to, the base, because it does not matter what the name of the practice is and who you are praying to. What we're getting at is the essence, the base, the core must be a connection of uniting the person you pray to. So if it's Allah, if it is Buddha, if it is God, whoever it is, that person or that entity, I should say, their principles need to be framed with justice in mind. There's no other way, you all. There's no other way. Principles cannot be detached from justice. And I can say it to you like this in case it just needs to have a case in point. I would just ask you rhetorically, who do you pray to that practices dehumanization? Like, do you pray to someone who practices dehumanizing people? Is that who you pray to? Do you pray to someone who believes in oppression? Do you believe in oppression because you idolize this person that you pray to? Does your God or Allah or Yahweh believe in harming other people? Do they believe that it's a good thing that we have thousands and thousands of people who are suffering from chemical issues in their body because of war, the impact of war and symptoms from bombs being dropped? Do you pray and are you happy because you and your God or you and your Allah are really excited that there are children who can't even focus in school because they are starving because their tummies are so empty that they cannot even focus on the lesson at hand? They are falling asleep in school because they are so hungry. Is that who you fellowship with? I'm pretty sure you all are saying no, because that's not really how we tend to think about spirituality and religion. In every single aspect, we're trying to look at ways to make the world better, or at least theoretically, that's what's supposed to be the purpose of spirituality and religion. Some people would argue that it's okay to harm people, and they pray and believe in that. So we're obviously not talking about that particular practice, but for those of us that know from a theoretical lens, for the most part, it's supposed to be based on advancing the world and making it a better place. So I'm pretty sure you're not praying to someone who believes that oppression is a good thing. So if that is the case, then case in point, because your entity is one that practices love and support, your entity is something that believes in humanity. Whoever you pray to, your entity believes that the world should be a better place for all people, regardless of race, regardless of class, regardless of gender, regardless of differently ability people, regardless of whether or not this person has a lot of money or no money, regardless of if they identify as LGBTQ, regardless of if they're from Asia, if they're from Ireland, if they're from Africa, it does not matter. You are praying to someone who believes that all people matter. That's who you're praying to. Hypothetically, I'm assuming. You probably wouldn't be on the seminar if you weren't. So if that is the case, then case in point, God is justice. Allah is justice. Yahweh is justice. And therefore, this reality can never be ignored, which means there's always going to be a connection of uniting your entity with principles that are framed with justice in mind. That is the case in point. And I'll say one final thing before I turn it back to my dad. When trying to justify disconnecting God from justice, that is probably one of the most heinous and criminal things that a person could do, because what you're really arguing is that by separating justice from the entity that you practice and serve and worship, what you're arguing is that we're using these entities for anti-human objectives. And I just always think about the lynching museum in Montgomery, Alabama, and how when you walk in, there's two parts. So I'm talking about the part where they focus a little bit more on the Equal Justice Initiative part, and they have all these different stands and pieces that you can look at from different prisoners who have been wrongly accused. And when you move forward and you start walking through the building where you're starting to get to the main room and you start to turn right, you see all these photos on the wall. And as you're walking around the wall, you're looking and seeing photos of churches throughout the state of Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, all these different states and all these different churches Meanwhile, there are lynchings that are taking place outside of these sacred temple walls, outside of these beloved walls, outside of these safe walls, outside of these holy walls, right? And so it's really a trip to me because there's these little captions under the photos that say, you know, there have been many debates about whether or not Christians were to be held responsible for the lynchings that took place outside their church. We're not going to sit here and tell you whether or not, you know, you need to believe in that. We all know that killing people is wrong. Again, you wouldn't be on this seminar if you didn't agree with that. So if we know that killing is wrong, lynching equals killing. So therefore, that's not a good practice of religion or spirituality, because that's actually practicing an anti-human situation, which is what we just said is not the true definition of what your entity should be practicing. And you need to be very mindful that when we live in a capitalist society, everything is based off of profit and income gaining, which means the idea of God equaling justice, the idea of Allah equaling justice has been strongly manipulated and stripped. And it's up to you all to remember how to weave and sew those pieces back together. Because if you yourself are not practicing and praying to an entity that is justice loving and is peace loving and is seeking justice for all people, then you're not going to believe those values yourself. Because the whole reason you pray is to get influence from the entity you're praying from, which means you need to reevaluate what your values are. Because if you yourself are anti-human, then what good are you to the rest of us? How are you making the world a better place? That's what we need to really unpack. Ashe.
Ashe, thank you. Thank you. And I just want to start with where you left off. Like an example of what we're talking about today, you all, is spirituality, again, is a system of principles and practices. Religion can be spiritual, but religious practices can be non-spiritual. Like if you get up and work out every day, you exercise every day, that's a ritual that has nothing to do with, or it could have something to do with spirituality, but doesn't necessarily have to. So we're really wanting to make sure that that difference is clear. Like you can have spirituality and not have religion, and you can have religion and not have spirituality. In fact, in the APRP, we've always said, don't let religion interfere with your spirituality. Don't let school interfere with your education. So, you know, recognizing the difference between the honored spiritual faith and the institutions that operate within the capitalist system. And the example on the screen right now is the despicable state of Israel. This is a state that has many of us convinced that it is a religious state. It is a state of Judaism. And what we would respond to that and say, you all, is that no entity that is operating under principles of justice can also operate by oppressing people. And we don't have time. You know, we've done many workshops on the state of Israel. You know, you can go back through these videos and check them out. We don't have time to go into that discussion today. I understand a whole lot of people don't understand it, but there's a lot of information about it. But the point we're making right now is that that land belongs to the Palestinian people, and it was stolen from them by these Europeans who claim a religious right to it. And this is a prime example in my mind of what we're saying. When you divorce principles of justice from your spiritual practice, then it no longer is an honored spiritual practice. It's just a guise you're using to justify your terroristic actions. And what I'm saying is that, and what the APRP is saying is that exactly is what Israel does. So we'll go further. What we're talking about when we say that, sorry about that. As soon as I can get my computer to work. Okay, so let's talk about the challenges of, you know, churches, mosques, synagogues, whatever the case may be. What is the challenge today? And we'll give several examples to illustrate this point, right? The original prophets of the faiths right? They always fought through adversity to ensure that their faith represented justice, right? If you know the history of Jesus, you know Jesus did that. Jesus fought against the Pharisees. He waged class struggle. You know, Jesus didn't have Roman citizenship like Paul and Abraham and all the other people talking in the various versions of the Bible. And that's why if you study how Jesus talked in the Bible and compared to how these other people talked, you see a difference. Because when people have privilege and they have the ability to exist in a society and receive privileges, then that's going to color how they represent themselves in that society. Jesus didn't have that in the Roman Empire, so he found himself fighting against that empire. The same with the Prophet Muhammad in Islam. The Prophet Muhammad was chased viciously by the people who opposed his efforts to spread Islam throughout the world. And were it not for his venture into Africa from the Middle East, we probably would not know what Islam is today. It was Africa that shielded the Prophet Muhammad for many years and allowed him to regroup and organize his teachings so that he could bring Islam to the world. And I'm talking about thousands of years ago, right? So don't, you know, and the origins 700 AD when that happened. We're not talking about, you know, understand the difference, because I know some people, you know, because we don't like to study. We love to talk, but we don't like to study. And I know some people will say, well, the Islam, they enslaved African people. Well, then, yeah, congratulations, because you're paying attention to what we're saying. The difference between a spiritual principles and practices and rituals and practices. A lot of people engage in rituals. The people in Israel say that we're the people of the Jewish faith, and we question that because of their actions. Because if you say you're a part of this honored faith, it has to be demonstrated through your actions. If you say you're a Christian, it has to be demonstrated through your actions. You can't tell me you're a Christian and you support war against Afghanistan and Iraq. You support U.S. military bases all over Africa. You support putting men in control of what happens with women's bodies. You ain't no damn Christian. You're just somebody who's following someone else's political agenda, and you don't have sense enough to realize that. So that's what we're saying. Understand those differences there. Understand those differences between principles and practices and rituals. Understand those differences. Just because you go to church every Sunday or you go to the mosque or the masjid every Friday, that doesn't mean a goddamn thing. You know, my mother used to, bless her spirit, used to call me every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. when she was living. And she's been, you know, gone from us for quite some time now. But she used to call me. She'd say, son, I know you're not going to church. And I just think, you know, your life will be much better when you go to. She never asked me one time, what are you doing in this organization you're in? You know, how are you helping people? How are you helping make the world a better place? She knew that I was doing this work, but she never wanted to talk about that. And one day I told her, like, you call me every Sunday and you say this to me, but it's really odd to me because I could be going out last night, impregnating 1,000 women. And as long as I tell you, yes, I went to church today, then in your book, I'm doing quite all right. And then I went on to ask her, like, how can you, because in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we study. So in my cadre circle over the years, we have studied the Bible. We've studied the Quran. We've studied the Torah, which is the book for Judaism. We've studied all of these books. We've studied Santeria and Ife. We've studied all of these faith practices and principles. And when I mean study, I mean as a group, we've read them, we've discussed them, we've challenged each other, we've studied them. So we have, I'm going to just say it, a much better understanding of these things than most people who just go to some church house and listen to somebody else tell them about what they're supposed to think about it. And that's what I told my mother one day. I'm like, you know, I've known you my whole life. Obviously, I've never seen you even look in a Bible. I'm not saying, you know, because we're revolutionaries. So I'm not arguing, you know, I think the Bible is great fables and parables. And they're Some of that is designed to give you metaphors about how you should live your life. But I'm not a Christian, so it's not what I'm advancing. But my point to her is, since she claimed to be one, you should at least study the so-called principles that are supposed to guide the faith that you believe in. And I just never saw that. All I saw her do was go to church and listen to some pork chop Negro pastor tell her what she was supposed to think. And this is what I, began to gently talk to her about. And she began to understand it. But this is what we're saying to you now, is the capitalist system has undermined faith. It's used faith to convince people today that faith and capitalism are the same thing. And this is the reason why you have all these mega churches where these people are talking about what's that cracker's name, Joel Osteen and TD Jakes and all of these coons and crackers. And what they're doing is they're using the name of Jesus to justify becoming multimillionaires. When Jesus Christ wore sandals, you all. I mean, that is the complete contradiction. And any of you that justify that, when you're just a slave tool for the master, that there's no other way to put it. There's no other way to put it. That cracker down in Houston, Texas, where he is, that Osteen cracker, it was people that were not able to get in their houses because of the flooding down there. And this cracker wouldn't even open his church house up. I'm not talking about his personal house. He wouldn't even open. Well, what the hell good? Burn the goddamn thing down. I mean, what the hell good is it then? If the people can't use it who need it the most, who are suffering the most, what the hell? I mean, there's no way. You're out of your damn mind if you're going to tell me, well, he's a blessed Christian pastor. No, he's a pimp and a charlatan. And then if you go to Africa, when I'm in Africa, you see over there, they talk about, they have all these billboards. These religious leaders are celebrities. They talk about the prophet such and such, this, the prophet such and such, that. A prophet means that you talk to God, you all. I mean, but we're so childish in our thinking. We run around here actually thinking that these other human beings that don't have half the sense that we are actually talk to God. And they love that because it plays right into their game that they're running. And far too many of these people worldwide are focused more on wealth and fame in the capitalist system than they are on truth and justice. You can't refute that. You can get mad at me for saying it, but you cannot refute the truth in that. Because if you do, I'm going to respond and say, so where are all these churches that you belong to and support that are coming out with strong positions today against white supremacy, against oppression? Where are all these churches? Where are their voices? Where are all these churches coming out to defend women whose bodies are being violated by all these people who are doing it in the name of God? As they said, where are all the churches speaking out against that? Where is your TD Jakes, Creflo Dollar, and all these crooked coons? Where is their voice in all of this as it relates to justice? None of them are saying a damn thing about any of that because they don't care. It's not putting any money in their pockets. And you don't have to like that. You can't refute it. That's the point. We're not here to tell anybody what they like. We're here to talk about what's true and what needs to happen in order for us to wake the hell up. Some of us are so crazy. These white folks done convinced us that being awake is a bad thing and we don't want to associate. Go dip your head in some hot water. Maybe that'll wake you up. We gotta understand how to talk. I don't talk about religion. Well, what the hell? What do you talk about? I mean, what is there to talk about? We got to talk about these things because the way they're being utilized is misleading so many of us. So here are some examples, right, of these mega churches in Africa, like I said, in West Africa. And we'll talk about, on the screen, you have two ex-National Basketball Association players, right? One is on the top, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, right? He was a Muslim. And when he played in Denver for the Denver Nuggets here in the United Snakes of America, his method of practicing Islam is that he said that as a Muslim, I cannot bow down under oppression because oppression is against the will of God. We, as revolutionaries, could not agree with that more. That's the Shakura's point, is that any true faith has to be lined up with revolutionary principles and practices, because those principles and practices are about justice. So this is what this man said. And if you know the history, before the games, when they played their despicable, what they call a national anthem, garbage song, when they played it before the games, he would stay in the locker room. And then when the media started to call him out, the team demanded he come out with the team. So he would stand on the bench and pray. And he got demonized for that. Whereas below him, Hakeem Olajuwon was one of the best basketball players ever, brother out of Nigeria. He was a Muslim. Now, the capitalist system understands, they will always go to the coon and get the coon to speak out against the African who's displaying revolutionary principles and practices. In this example, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf is the African displaying revolutionary principles and practices under Islam. And Hakeem Olajuwon is the coon, the master's coon. They went to him and you should always respect a country that you live in, a great and free country. Now, where the hell, I would challenge him. He's a Muslim, at least he says he is. I would challenge him to show me where in the Quran, in the Holy Quran, does it talk about, the Holy Quran talks about standing up against infidels and injustice. It talks about that all throughout the book. So you tell me, where the hell in that book does it call the great Satan, as most right-thinking Muslims call the United Snakes of America? Where the hell in that book does it talk about honoring the great Satan? But this man is saying that because it's beneficial to his career at the time to talk like that. That's what the white man wanted him to say. That's what he says that for, because he's an Uncle Tom and a coon. I don't know if he's an Uncle Tom. I don't know him personally, but he's without question a coon, because this is what he talked about during the time that this was happening to his brother, in terms of culture and history, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, but his brother in terms of faith, Muslim brother. And he couldn't even, at least the best thing you could do is say, you know what, I'd rather not even talk about it. I'm not going to comment on what my brother in Islam is doing. At least do that. We can respect that, because you don't know anything about social justice. All you know about is basketball and soccer and eating and defecating. You don't know anything about our struggle for justice. So why even speak on it? You should have just did it the way I just said. But these are examples of the types of contradictions. The brother on the top, principles and practices related to justice. He lost his career standing up for what's right. The one on the bottom, doing everything he can to not offend the master. Got millions of dollars playing basketball, doing all that. I would take and respect the one on top all day long. The one on the bottom, great basketball player, but that's it. I wouldn't even spit in his direction if I saw him. So let's talk about the absence of faith leaders on questions of justice, because you can't say that they're everywhere. Oh, they're standing up for where are they? That's not happening. I know there are some, and we'll talk about that. There always have been some, and there always will be some. And that's what we're saying, is that if you are practicing a true faith of justice, you got to be one of those people. That's exactly our point. We are not attacking faith and religion. And if that's what you're getting from this, then you need a frontal lobotomy. I mean, there's just no way to say that. Like, you're insane and you're absolutely no benefit to the rest of humanity if that's the extent to which you can develop a thought. I mean, that's shameful. You should be ashamed that you can't think deeper than that. What we're saying is the absence of faith leaders on the question of justice. Where are the church and the mosque leaders on the question of war and sanctions and the strangling of humanity? Where is your church talking about a 62-year economic blockade against the people of Cuba who have done nothing? The only crime they've committed is they had the audacity to stand up against this backward cesspool nation. And they have 62 years of economic stranglehold. Where is your church's outrage about the illegal sanctions against Zimbabwe, against Venezuela? Where is your church's outrage against that? What are they doing to challenge that? We know that that's not happening on no wide-scale basis, and this should be the basis under which we judge these people and how they supposedly practice faith. That's what we're saying. Where are the faith leaders providing a humanistic response to the immigration crisis within this country right now. Where are the church leaders going to these borders saying, hands off these people? These people are only trying to come here because of the policies of this backward ass country for the last several decades. I know you don't know that, but there is no question about that. So get your goddamn hands off these people. We are servants of Jesus and Allah. We will die today defending justice for these people. Where are the church leaders doing that? They're not doing that. They're saying, oh, illegal immigration, we got to tighten our borders. The hell with you. And the hell with those of you that support these people. Where is that? Doesn't exist. Where are the African faith leaders on the continent speaking out against it, or even here, anywhere on earth, speaking out against institutional racism? How many of them are doing that? How many of them are uniting to have a united voice? They united to go talk to Donald Trump, one cracker, Trump. They united to do that. Where are they uniting to say, where's the press conference of hundreds of African spiritual leaders saying, no more of this nonsense. We're not tolerating this treatment against our people. When the hell has that ever happened? Don't tell us that. When are they speaking out against these practices of control of women? Where are they speaking out against the oppression of LGBTQ people? I'm not LGBTQ people, but I got sense between my ears. And I know that, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So I'm not stupid like a lot of people. I understand clearly that if there's a group of people over here who are being brutally oppressed, I'm not safe. So it's in my best interest to ensure that they're safe, because that's the best way to keep me safe. And that just makes common sense, because I can't sleep at night. I'm not like all these people that claim so much faith and so much commitment to God. I don't even believe in organized religion, but I have a much better commitment to justice than a whole lot of them people combined, because I can't even sleep at night if I know I could do something to save someone and I'm not doing it. And revolutionary principles and practices make you that way. So where are these people that are doing that? And part of the problem, if you look at this country, and then we'll talk about Africa, but if you look at this country, part of the problem is the corporatizing of the African spiritual institutions. What am I talking about? What I'm talking about is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was obviously very active in the movement for justice in humanity. And he had the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. It was a small independent church. Back in those days, in the 1960s, most of our churches were independent, meaning that the only people they had to answer to were the people who were putting money in the collection plate. And so that meant if you had a conscious minister like Dr. King, he could get up and talk about spirituality and a belief in Jesus, meaning that we have to stand up against injustice. And that's what that man did every Sunday. And the people began to be politicized and have their consciousness raised by doing that. And so they would put more money in the plate, because they began to see the church as a vehicle to fight for justice. And that's why the church was such an integral part of the civil rights movement in this country, because these churches were independent. Now, that's a thing of the past today. All of these churches are a part of these corporation organizations, like the one you see on the screen, the Church of God in Christ, Fair Square Ministries, all of these corporatized organizations that have attorneys on retainer that advise these churches, that tell these churches, don't speak out against that. Don't speak out against this. Speak out in favor of this. There are no more independent churches, just like there's no more independent bookstores. There's a few, but for the most part, it's been wiped out. No more independent record stores. All of it is being directed by the same voice with the same agenda. So we don't have any more Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s on a mass scale like we did in the 60s. We have some. There are some ministers that are really doing everything they can to represent justice. We're clearly not talking about them. So don't run out of here saying they talk about my pastor doing what your pastor needs to get better congregants than you, if that's what you're hearing there. We're saying the mass majority, the TD Jakes Negro the chicken foot pastors. That's who we're talking about. Y'all know who they are. You can turn on your TV right now and see them. They ain't talking about a goddamn thing that's worth anything. Well, and all they do is individualize our existence. Well, the reason why you're having problems because you're not living your life right. No, the reason why you're having problems is because we live in a backward, decadent capitalist system that's built on our backs and is maintained on our backs. And until we organize and destroy it, we're always going to have problems. That's why we have problems. And the reason why that person is telling you that is because they convince you that the only way you can stop your problems is by giving them all of your money. And all that's going to do is create more problems for you, a whole lot less problems for them. But it's the perfect scam. It's the perfect game. It's the perfect pimpdom. It's the perfect pimping to do against our people. And we've got so many of these black pimps out here today that are doing that. And if we talk about Africa, you talk about why are all these African countries like Uganda enacting this legislation, this anti-LGBTQ legislation? And I'll just say, like I've said 1,000 times before, I don't have a single problem in my life that's because of LGBTQ people. I'm not LGBTQ. I've got a wife. I'm not LGBTQ, but I understand justice. And I understand that clearly. So those folks have never presented a single problem to me. So any of you that try to argue with me why this is a problem like that, you're wasting your time. Don't even do it. I'm looking at it. I'm listening to you saying to myself, you're the problem. Because I know that the reason why these African pork chop ministers, Reverend Pig's Feet, Reverend Side Coleslaw, Side Potato Salad, Reverend Potato Salad, Reverend Rib Slab, the reason why they're talking like this, whether we're talking about in this country, in anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, in Africa, in Europe, the reason why Reverend Chicken Wing is talking like that is because there are organizations that are driving us to have this low level of consciousness. Like one is Samaritan Power. I know we've never heard of it because we don't study anything, but Samaritan Power is an organization run by Franklin Graham, who's the crooked son of that old cracker Billy Graham, evangelist Billy Graham. And what these crackers do is they go all over Africa, they go all over the world, and they spread this doctrine of homophobia because it adheres to their political agenda. And so they do that in Africa. While those of us over here sitting there, I ain't got nothing to do with Africa. They're over there working on the ground in Africa, spreading these backward ideas among our people. And they're doing it here as well. How do I know this? Because all you got to do is do what I do, research it. If you go to their website, they got a damn website. It's free to go to the website. You don't have to pay to access the website. They talk about their talking points. And their talking points are the same talking points that coon in Uganda articulated when he announced the legislation against the LGBTQ people. It's the same talking points that these coons here are. What's that? There's one coon that's on TikTok all the time. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. He really thinks that he's saying something, and the coons in there act like he's saying a goddamn thing. But he's always anti. Well, you're like a sissy. That dude is. I don't know his name. I'd call him if I didn't. I don't care. But he's the sissy. And I love to see him in public. These people doing this stuff, but these are the same Samaritan Power talking points. So it all comes from a white. That's why I tell Africans all the time. They're talking about their black nationalists. They love African people, and they're using these homophobic talking points. And I'm like, your talking points come from the Europeans. You so anti-European, your talking points come from them. It's just a lot of cowardice in how they practice these religions. It's not based on justice. These people wouldn't stand up for injustice. They wouldn't stand up for justice if it meant them being uncomfortable for 20 seconds. They wouldn't do it. So here, an example. Shakur said Kwame Nkrumah in the first slide, but it was Amin Sekou Touré, who's also in this picture here. And he was a Muslim in Guinea, in West Africa. He was a revolutionary. He was a Pan-Africanist. There's no contradiction. That's why in the party, we say that there is no contradiction between revolution and religion. That's what we say. Because again, if you're true to your spiritual faith, then you have to support. There's no such thing as someone, yeah, I'm a true Christian, I'm a true Muslim, I'm a true Jew, but yes, socialism is bad. I think socialism, that doesn't even, you don't even understand, you haven't even studied the principles and practices of people like the Prophet Muhammad or Jesus Christ. You haven't even studied these people to make a statement like that. Their whole lives were based on socialist principles. There's no question, I don't care, bring me any Muslim, any Christian, and I'll be able to show them how they can't refute that statement. Their whole lives were based on socialist principles. So the positive direction with our spirituality, it requires faith should be seen as a personal tool to advance your humanity, not a vehicle to govern society. Use it to make yourself a better person. But you can't force your beliefs on other people. There are many different beliefs, especially for us as African people, because of our history, our culture before colonialism, during colonialism, and during this period of neo-colonialism. We don't need to say that, well, it has to be a Muslim society or a Christian society. We just need to say that whatever your beliefs are, they need to be rooted in justice. 2, if your faith is so correct, have respect for people's agency to figure that out on their own. You don't have to shame people. You don't have to pass laws against people. That's not somebody that demonstrates that they truly believe in the correctness of their faith. All you have to do is the same thing we're doing. We're not trying to get no laws passed against nobody. We don't even believe in that. We're trying to bring a discussion to people. We're trying to say, this is the things that we need to think about. We're not doing it with any weapons. The only weapon that we're using is trying to get you to use your brain. That's it. That's the only weapon we have. And I am convinced that that's the only weapon we need. And if you believe in your faith, you should believe the same thing. In any faith that covets capitalist, white supremacist, and patriarchal values, that's not a true faith. That's a pimp religion. That's a pimp practice. It's a propaganda mechanism for injustice. That's all it is. I don't care what you call it. I don't care how mad you. I hope you do get mad. I hope you get so mad that you burst into flames. You should, because clearly you're not serious about understanding how to use whatever it is you're practicing to make the world a better place. So if, as Kwame Ture used to say, if you're not going to live for humanity, at least die for it. Burst into flames. Give somebody some entertainment. And instead of embracing cowardly values like, I don't talk about religion, talk about it. But you got to know what you're talking about. You can't just be running your mouth and don't know what the hell you're talking about. You got to know what you're talking about. We need to talk about it. We need to talk about spirituality has to equal justice. Who the hell, what kind of sense does it make to say we can't talk about that? I mean, you out of your damn mind. We got to talk about it. And we have to think about it in constructive ways in an organized fashion. So that means you can't just do this individually. You got to be a part of something that has a program that's designed to take this out amongst our people. And if we do that, we can make it so that these forms of spiritual faith have the respect that they rightfully deserve because they're fulfilling the purpose that they should fulfill and are not being used and pimped to benefit some people and cause so many millions of us to just continue to suffer. We thank you for joining us today. We truly do. We want to invite you next week, October 8th, is the commemoration of the assassination of Ernesto Che Guevara. There's a lot of anti-Che Guevara propaganda. Oh, he was racist. He wasn't racist. He lived his life fighting for people of color. He went to Africa and fought in Africa. You wouldn't even go 5 feet to fight for your own African people. And this white man did that. So we're going to talk about Che Guevara next week all day long. We're not going to let these reactionaries, these anti-communists, these anti-human people tell us who our heroes are. So if you want to know who Che Guevara is, join us next week. Go to the AAPRP Forward Ever shop, buy something, buy some positive propaganda about the African Revolution, support revolutionary independent African organizations. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to AAPRP-intl.org. Sign up to join a work study process today. Go to betterworld.me. You can get all these videos are there. You can go back, you can share them. Please do that. Hood Communist is something we encourage you to support every Thursday. There's new articles, Revolutionary African Voices. Again, the QR code and the URL are on the screen for the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. It's a program sponsored by the All-African People's Revolutionary Party through our organizers on the ground in Burkina Faso, West Africa. And speaking of Burkina Faso, for those of you, this Thursday, October 5th, we have an event, No War with Africa, the fight for Pan-Africanism and liberation in Africa. We have a panel about that topic, what's happening in Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and the other countries in the Sahel region. The panel will consist of Pierre Ribrassier of the Haiti Action Committee, Antonio Gonzalez of the American Indian Movement. We have a representative from the Black Alliance for Peace who's speaking. I'm speaking representing the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, and we hope to have a speaker from the Palestinian movement as well. So come on out, support all our programs that are listed there on the screen. If you can't come out to the program Thursday, it'll be live streamed, still can't talk, streamed. So check it out. Please buy my book and tell others about it, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. The fascists are organizing. We stand for justice. We are not going to let them terrorize our people and our communities. We stand for justice. So whenever they're out there, we will be out there trying to stop them. I don't care if I'm 70 years old. I still have enough faith in justice that I could swing on a cracker that's promoting white supremacist violence against my people in the community. I will still be able to do that because my religion, which is revolutionary principles and practices of Nkrumahism, Touareism, and Cabralism, the ideology of the African Revolution, has taught me that the only thing I have to be afraid of is being a coward. Thank you for being with us today. Join us again next week. We hope you have a great rest of your Sunday evening and a great rest of your week. Forward ever, backwards never.